Adam A2, candidate number 6296. The performer I've been watching is highly skilled. I place them in the top end of the participation phase in the participation pyramid because it looks like they're climbing for a club and they're doing it out of enjoyment, but I don't feel that they are competent enough to be climbing for a team or for regionals. I'll place them in the associative phase of learning. To place them in these two continuums, I've looked at some criteria. So firstly, the individual's movement and climbing is fluent. I can tell it's fluent because all the skills flow into each other really well. Secondly, it's consistent because the quality of the skill performed at the bottom of the climb in comparison to the quality of the skill performed at the top of the climb is high. So at the bottom of the climb, he performed a step through, and at the top of the climb, he performed smearing, and they are of the same quality. Next, I can tell the individual has spare tensile capacity. In terms of rock climbing, spare tensile capacity is normally to do with the individual planning their route and knowing where they're going to go next. This means the fact that he has spare tensile capacity means that he has well-grooved motor programs. It means that when he's looking at the holds, he more thinks about what move he has to perform and not how he has to perform that move. The fact that they're well-grooved and habitual also helps with keeping his arousal level at an optimum point. In terms of feedback, I feel the individual mostly uses intrinsic feedback. At multiple points in the climb, the individual locks off his arms via the tricep brachii, and his body is quite far away from the wall, meaning his centre of gravity is also quite high. So he's likely to, or it's more likely for him to fall or become unbalanced. However, in many instances, individuals experience the barn door effect, where they pivot at the arms and either one of their shoulders hits the wall because they are unbalanced, whereas this individual didn't do that, most probably because he uses kinesis and the intrinsic feel of the body. If he does become balanced, he can correct himself. So for example, if he's slightly leaning towards the left, the individual could contract his bicep brachii in his right arm and correct himself. In terms of extrinsic feedback, in rock climbing, it's always important to have because of your belayer. However, it's mostly to communicate and say that they've clipped and ask for slack. On this particular climb, the individual did not need to ask about where they needed to go. They did not get stuck. One skill strength that the individual evidently had was their clipping in. This clipping in is also a tactical strength. So when they were clipping in, they always had a stable base. Their feet were always on holds, and they'd always do it with one hand, i.e. If they were clipping in using their right hand, they would use their left hand as a point of contact in the wall, meaning they were more stable. So for example, if they're clipping in their right hand, they'd lock off their left arm, meaning there's an isometric contraction, but it's not too strenuous. When clipping in, the individual always, with his index finger, he set the carabiner in. So it meant sometimes when individuals place quick draws, the carabiner twists, with the sling twists, meaning the carabiner twists, which can cause cross clips. But whenever you set it, the carabiner comes into the correct position. And when he slides the rope in, he always does it correctly, i.e. no cross clips. And the rope going down towards the belay is always at the back. When he does clip in, before he takes the rope to clip in, he always brushes his figure of 8 retied knot and stopper knot before he takes the rope. This means that when he's taking the rope, he's not taking rope from underneath the previous carabiner he clipped. Another skill strength that the individual had was the closed hand crimp. On this particular climb, there were quite a few instances where he used it. So the individual always places it whenever the individual needs to do the crimp, he used it, this means that he has good muscular endurance and muscular strength in his hand, because the crimp does put a lot of stress on the ligaments and tendons in your hands. When he placed his fingers onto the small hold that he was using, he placed his thumb on top of his index finger to help close it off and ensure that when he pulls up on it, it doesn't come away from the wall. This was effective in most parts of the climb. One major skill strength that the individual had was their step through at the beginning of the climb. Firstly, it was very aesthetically pleasing, and secondly, it was well performed. So the individual had his left hip turned into the wall, giving him balance, and both his arms were extended above his head on good holds to hold his body weight. However, because his legs were flexed at the hip via the iliopsoas, it meant that he could mostly use his feet to climb, and his arms were more of a stabilizing factor. As he was climbing using his legs, they were fully extended via the rectus femoris and the three vastus, and his gastrocnemius extended his toes on two holds because they were slightly further away. He always kept his legs fully extended, and his arms were flexed at points where he used his gluteus maximus to flex and extend his legs at the hip to progress upwards, and his bicep brachii and tricep brachii would then be used as he was progressing up to gain access to holds further above his head. As I said, his hip was turned in, so that gave him balance. His eyes were also a major factor in this skill. Now, he did perform this skill slowly, but this meant that he had time to always check that his feet and hands were at handholds and footholds that would hold him, so he reduced and minimized the chance of him falling. In terms of a tactical strength, as I said, the clipping in was extremely good because of all all of the correct checks that he done, i.e. brushing the knot, ensuring there's no cross clips, communicating with his belayer. In terms of his fitness strengths, I would say one major fitness strength of his is his coordination. His coordination is very good. It helps with his balance. When clipping in, for example, he always got to the carabiner successfully. So when he brushed the knot and took the rope up, he wouldn't be to the right or to the left of the carabiner. It would always be directly on the carabiner. This minimizes the time that he's vulnerable to falling, because as soon as he clips, he can take access to another. He can take access to another hold and make sure he's secure. As well as this, if he's just generally climbing and he's reaching for holds, or even in the step through at the beginning, when he moves his legs and moves his arm, he does it with precise coordination that he's not wasting any energy, and he's successfully getting to them. In terms of a skill weakness, the climb was quite short and the performer was highly skilled, so there was not too much to go wrong. However, at one point where the individual needed to chalk, he locked off his arm, so he was quite far away from the wall, and he had his left foot on the handhold, on the foothold, sorry, and however, he left his right foot slightly dangling. This meant that he had a reduced amount of contact with the wall, for example. So what I would suggest is that the individual could have smeared instead, because it means that it's increased contact with the wall, which reduces his chances of falling. Tactical weakness-wise, Although I said that his clipping in was good, at points when he was choosing to clip in, maybe his decision making could have been a bit better. So although I said that he had a steady base, sometimes the individual could have gone further up to clip in rather than stretch for it, because if he's stretching for it, there's more of a chance that he's going to fall, and because he's already gone past the carabiner that he's clipped, if he does fall, it's going to be larger, whereas if he just progressed a tiny bit more and then clipped, it meant that he'd be more secure when clipping and would help with his safety. In terms of a fitness weakness, I think one of the, although the climb was good and generally his fitness is good, a particular thing that he could improve upon is his flexibility. So there was one instance where towards the top of the climb, he was trying to lift his left leg onto a foothold, but he couldn't quite get there, so what he had to do is, using his arms, he had to pull up and smear and then access the foothold with his left foot, whereas if he did have better flexibility, he wouldn't have had to use that muscular strength. He would have wasted less energy. He would have just reached up using his left foot onto the foothold straight away, and this would have reduced the energy used, and it would have been more aesthetically pleasing, because at points where individuals smear while they're using their body weight to move up the wall, it can look a bit like scrambling, and smearing comes with an increased chance of the individual falling. Because of this, I would choose to improve the individual's flexibility in the program. I choose flexibility because it means that their whole general performance will be improved. So for example, if I chose to improve the layback, it meant that the layback would only be improved, whereas flexibility can be applied to loads of different things within rock climbing. So mantle shelves, layback, step throughs, flagging, loads of different things. So in this instance, I'd be looking at dynamic flexibility, because it takes into account the speed of the movement when it's at the end of its range of motion. So to design an action plan for the program, I would use 1 mesocycle and 2 microcycles. So the mesocycle would be 6 weeks long, and each microcycle will be 3 weeks long. So at the beginning of any program, you should test the individual's fitness capabilities in what you're aiming to improve. There's 2 methods that he can use to do this. So he could use either a sit and reach test or a goniometer. Sit and reach tests only really look at flexibility in the hamstrings and quadricep groups. So I'll prefer to use the goniometer because it's more accurate. This consists of the individual moving the specific limb and joint through the range of motion until the point of resistance is felt. So before anything, I would do testing. When I've done testing, I can use the SMARTER principle to create targets for the individual. So the first target is, or the first concept within SMARTER is specific. I would ensure that the program is specific to the individual, because I'm more looking at improving the flexibility within the leg muscles, not the upper body. So most of the exercises will be focused on the leg muscles. So all yoga, PNF, which I'll get into a bit later, are more focused on the bottom muscles. It will be measurable, as I said. I'll be testing it frequently. I won't do it too frequently because it could demotivate the performer if they don't see any improvement. So I'll do a test at the beginning, test halfway through, and test at the end. As well as this, the actual flexibility exercises that they will be performing will be for a set amount of time, i.e. it is operationalised, it is for a set amount of time. Next in the SMART principle is accepted. So before anything, I have to talk to the performer. I have to ensure that they want to improve their flexibility themselves. Next is realistic. Realistic wise, it just means that I can't aim too high for the performance improvements. So for example, if they scored 0 on the sit and reach test, in 6 weeks they're not going to improve and get to 20. It's not realistic, so I need to keep them within realistic bounds to ensure that they can achieve the target and they're not demotivated by it. It's time bound. As I said, I'm using periodization, the mesocycle and the 2 microcycles, to ensure that they have a time period that they know of, that they have to improve it within. It's going to be, the next principle is enjoyable / exciting. So within the program, I'm going to use loads of different stretching techniques. So there's static stretching, dynamic stretching, PNF, ballistic, as well as yoga sessions and Pilates sessions. So I'll vary those a bit later on. I'll talk about and how the individual will switch them up between the weeks. Lastly, I will record all progress and all sessions that they do. This means I can keep track of the performance throughout the program. Right, so then using Mrs. VOP, I'll design the program. So obviously I have to ensure that the amount that they're doing is in moderation, because too much could cause them to injure themselves. However, too little might mean that they do not experience as much adaptation as they want. Reversibility is the next one, and this will only apply really if they get injured. To ensure that they warm up, etc., prevent injury. Specificity, as I said before, is they're focusing on the particular joint / muscle that they're using. Variance is to prevent boredom. As I said, that more links into enjoyability. As I said, they're using loads of different types of stretching just to avoid boredom. Overload and progression come together, so progressive overloads just to ensure that they're not doing too much. However, they should always be doing a bit more than they done last time to make sure that their flexibility doesn't plateau, because you want continuous improvement. And periodization is the last one, which I've spoken about, and how the individual's going to coordinate their program, i.e. the 2 microcycles. So firstly, when we're talking about flexibility exercises, the most important thing is the individual has to warm up, because without warming up, the training program could be, well, it won't be as useful as it would be if they didn't warm up, because the muscles do not have that degree of flexibility and warmth that will help move them through the range of motions. So, for example, in the first week, I would prescribe 3 sessions. One of them will be a yoga session around half an hour to an hour long of just simple movements. This will just, it will mean that they gain a certain degree of flexibility, and throughout the program, it's not too strenuous, because obviously they're just starting off. And then the other 2 sessions, I will more focus on static flexibility. So I'd use the dynamic flexibility practices during the warm-up, because with dynamic flexibility, it means that the power and strength of the muscle is more maintained, whereas static flexibility could inhibit it sometimes. However, static stretches are a very useful way to improve flexibility with the static stretches in the first week, in the 2 sessions, I would hold them or the individual would hold them for 30 seconds, and in the first week I'd have 2 sets of 30 seconds, just to ensure that they're just gaining a certain degree of flexibility for the training program ahead. And then in the next week, I would do possibly 3 sessions again, another yoga session just to keep it standard. Then I could do, with the 3 sessions, or 2 sessions, sorry, I'd do 3 sets of 30 seconds or 4 sets of 30 seconds, just to ensure I'm getting a certain degree of overload and that they are continuously overloading and improving. I'd then follow this onto the 3rd week. In the 3rd week I'd do, say, 4 sessions a week. The 4 sessions would consist of maybe one yoga / Pilates session, possibly 2, and the other 2/3 could be static stretches. And by the 3rd week I could introduce more ballistic stretches. These are when the individual uses momentum to take the muscle and joint to its full range of motion. By the 4th, 5th and 6th week, I want the individual to be carrying out PNF exercises. So PNF is a very useful method to improve flexibility. It involves inhibiting the stretch reflex mechanism in the muscle, meaning the individual can they improve their flexibility in their legs more, which is what we want, because they need to be able to access high footholds. So in the 4th, 5th and 6th week, I'll prescribe 5 sessions. So I'll keep it at 4 sessions in the 4th and 5th week. I'll do 1 yoga session, keep it that standard. I'll do 2 static / dynamic / ballistic sessions, increasing the sets, of course, and but however I'd keep the stretching time at about 30 seconds, then increase the sets to around 5 to 6, and then one of those sessions will at the end of the week will be PNF, which is with a partner. Then the 5th and 6th week, I'll do, instead of so I'll do 1 yoga. I'll keep it at 5 sessions, and in the 6th week I'll do a 6th session. So 4 and 5 is 5, and so in the 5th week it will consist of a yoga session, 2 static / dynamic, and 2 PNF. Increase the amount of PNF because that is one of the best ways to improve the individual's flexibility. By the 6th week, I'll do a yoga session. I'll do 3 static sessions and 2 PNF sessions. And with the static sessions, I'll increase the time in comparison to the first week. I'll increase the time, so they'll be doing it at 30 seconds. However, they'll be on around 8 sets, and intensity-wise, in comparison to the first week where they're doing it to a low intensity where it's not particularly excruciating, I'll ensure that they are stretching it to the maximum possible where pain is felt, because this will allow the maximum amount of adaptations. Then at the end of the program, I'll test the individual again, and he can check their performance in comparison to the first tests. Opportunity-wise, in the UK, there's not too much because it's really highly urbanised, and there's no real genuine wilderness because it is quite a small country. In terms of opportunity, the only real opportunity around many areas is indoor rock climbing walls, and the benefit of this is that we have a highly developed air, rail and road network, meaning we can get to the facilities and practice at them. In general, on weekends, like you wouldn't be travelling extremely far on roads, you'd just be going to your local facilities. However, it is possible to travel to outdoor facilities where you can do it. However, in comparison to Australia, where the opportunities there are a lot more opportunities. The UK is not as good for rock climbing. Firstly, the Australian weather helps with it a lot because it's extremely hot, meaning outdoor activities are a lot more enjoyable. The country is extremely large, and there is genuine wilderness, meaning you can go to places where there are mountains, real mountains, and climb. As well as they also have a developed road railing network, meaning they can get to those mountains